Happy game day, everybody. Welcome to the GameQuest, the Volquest.com Game Day podcast. I'm Eric Cain. We're upgrading this week. Instead of Grant Ramey out with the old, in with the new, we get Matt Ray. And if you're watching, you'll see that Matt and I are twinsies today. Both I have our quarter zips, our Volquest quarter zips on. And Matt, appreciate you joining us, man. Big game coming up this weekend.
Was not pre-planned. Was not pre-planned, but it's a big game. I gotta say, I mean, I usually match AP, so at least it's you this week, Kaner.
Yeah, at least it's me.
Like last week at UConn, I was like, you know what? It's a little cold out. It's a noon kick. I'm gonna start the day in my kind of oatmeal cream looking Volquest hoodie, like nobody else will be wearing that. I roll out there in it, and here comes AP in the oatmeal cream Volquest sweatshirt. I'm like, what do you do?
Listen, I just wear what the wife lays out for me the night before. Okay,
that's the best idea.
Just kidding. Huge game though. Tennessee, Missouri. Yeah. Again, we've been talking about it all week long. 7-2, 3-2 in SEC play. Fighting for rights of second place in the SEC East, but it could be even more than that. Of course, if you take care of business, if Ole Miss somehow beats Georgia in Athens, then you're playing for an East, essentially a chance to go to Atlanta next week with Georgia on CBS Kick. So that's exciting. But more than anything, this game will determine whether you finish with 9 wins or not. 10 wins is still on the table, but for all intents and purposes, we're going to say Vanderbilt's going to be a win. That'll get you to 8 wins no matter what. And if you win this game, it pretty much guarantees you 9 wins. And finishing with a, at worst 9-3 regular season record following a 10-win regular season in 2022, despite all you lost and all the injuries you had to overcome this year, I'll say that's a pretty solid season. I mean, again, winning at Missouri is not a given, but this is a big-time game in terms of keeping your East hopes alive, at least for a couple hours, and trying to get to that win total that you can feel good about at season's end.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you win this game, and again, your hopes are alive at least for a couple of hours, right? So there's some excitement there from your fan base that kind of tunes everybody into Georgia Ole Miss, what happens there in a big-time night game. But, I think you're right, Eric. I think you touched on it. Coming off a 10-win regular season last year, you battled through some early adversity this year. That Florida game is going to haunt Tennessee for a long time. And we said that right after they lost, that this was going to be a game that stuck with them. But to still be able to overcome some of that, overcome the injuries that you have, and potentially win 9 games, 10 games in the regular season, or set yourself up to do that would be huge. So it's a massive game this weekend. It's a huge game for Missouri, too. They're looking to bounce back and prove that they're on the right track under Eli Drinkwitz.
I think this was a game that everybody circled and kind of saying, all right, this is going to be, or not circled, but everybody just kind of pegged in a W here for this game. Even Trouble out there, I understand Trouble's been high on Missouri, big-time Missouri fan all offseason, but I don't think even Trouble can envision Missouri having this much success. Now, again, Missouri's not the 85 Bears, but Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz, 7-2, and they don't have many marquee wins. I recognize that, but just where Missouri has been in recent memory, I don't think anybody thought that they'd have a turnaround of 7-2 and have a chance to, up until last week, really had a chance to still win the East. I just see improved play on the offensive end. It's been a solid defense. It's gotten a lot better since 2021, and doing it with the same personnel for the most part. This is just a much improved football team, and it's very far from a guaranteed win or a guaranteed W you can write beside this on the schedule.
Yeah, it is, and I think, even for me, I felt like Missouri would be improved because you do bring a lot of that same personnel back. They've got a lot of really good athletes at the skill spots.
But you lost your best skill from now. Luther Burden was the best talent-wise, but
right.
You lost your best skill from last year in Dominic Lovett, and you're even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for Missouri, you're looking at a team that maybe they're exceeding expectations a little bit, but they surprised me last week with the way that they played in Athens. I mean, I kind of thought, hey, it's time to come back down to earth. It was a physical football game, but to go there and to really play into the fourth quarter with Georgia, I think is challenging for any team in the country to do right now, and they were able to do it. So this is going to be a test for Tennessee. I think for Tennessee, though, in some ways, I think when you're talking about this earlier in the year, you talk about, do you fall into the trap game at Missouri somewhat? Like, they're going to be a better football team, but it's really hard to go out there and get up. It's a tough place to play because the environment's maybe not the best. But now I think 3:30 CBS kick. I like the time slot. The atmosphere should be fine, and you've got something to play for. This game means something. It's not one that you should be glancing over, even though Georgia's kind of looming on the horizon. You know that you have to take care of business this weekend to make next weekend even bigger. And I think under Josh Heupel, I think for the most part, his teams have kind of lived up to those expectations. So they haven't played very well on the road. Over the last few, improved against Kentucky, played much better football there. But this game means something, and I think Tennessee's going to have a chance to get up, and come off the bus ready to play.
Yeah, Brent mentioned it first on the Rocky Top Rewind, and maybe mentioned it again on the Volquest podcast. Football is kind of weird. Matchups can be weird sometimes. It was at Mizzou last year, but Missouri played Georgia better than anybody in the regular season last year. I mean, had a chance to win that game in the fourth quarter. Missouri played Georgia well in Athens between the hedges just last week. Tennessee went on and destroyed Missouri after that last year. Just destroyed Missouri. It's just weird. It's not to the Tennessee's dominance over Missouri with Josh Heupel at head coach is not to the level of Florida, Tennessee, and then Tennessee, Kentucky, but maybe we're onto something, especially if Tennessee wins in lopsided fashion. I think Tennessee can have success. I think Tennessee can certainly win this game. I don't see it being another 62-24, 65-24. No. I mean, I've thrown the stat out all week long because I just think I wrote it down, and it's amazing just to read it off. 2 seasons with Josh Heupel the past 2 years against Missouri. Tennessee has outscored Missouri 128-48 with 1,407 yards of total offense, 722 yards rushing in those 2 football games. I think Tennessee can be successful. I think Jalen Wright can run for 100+. I think Joe Milton can have a day. I think Tennessee can win. I'm not seeing a 62-24, but maybe the winner, Matt, might have to score 45. I think that this is not going to be a very, very defensive football game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I was probably lower on the total in the Volquest picks, but the more that you kind of sit back and think about it, game days here, it does feel like this is going to be it shapes up to be more of a shootout. Now, I do think both defenses have some guys that can allow you to get off the field. Both defenses are much improved. There were times last week where Missouri got off the field where it just felt like, okay, this is where Georgia goes down and takes absolute control of this game, and that didn't really happen. And there's been times, this year where, albeit minus Florida, where I felt like the defense had to play with their backs against the wall more times than not. But this Tennessee defense has done a pretty good job of getting off the field in big situations. A couple of quarters, have really, really hurt the Vols in their 2 losses. But, you have to find a way to get off the field against Missouri. Do not allow them to sustain drives. And, you have to – and for the most part, I think Tennessee's done a better job of this. And if you look at how Alabama has kind of played since Tennessee, the way that they've used Jalen Milroe, now it really feels like Tennessee did a pretty good job of hemming Jalen Milroe in for the most part. I mean, he absolutely – granted, LSU's defense is not very good, but he absolutely torched them last week. So you have to limit the quarterback run. And I think one of you talk about matchups, I think one of the things that sets up really well for Tennessee is how well this front 7, defends the run. The Schrader kid has just been a great story. He's an impressive back. He runs really hard. They do a really good job of stretching, on the zone and getting outside for him. And he's really explosive once he finds that. He's patient, and he manages to fall forward for some hard yards. But I think if you slow him down, then that changes the dynamic of the Missouri offense a little bit. Again, great skill guys on the outside. Theo Weiss, Luther Burden, Mookie Cooper. Those guys are ball players. But I still think it changes the dynamic. I think they, win based on the ability for Missouri to be balanced, and they've done a really good job of that.
How have these guys done individually throughout the season? Where does Missouri rank offensively and defensively in the SEC in certain statistics? And what are some keys to victory, bold takes, and score predictions? All that and more coming up as we continue on here with GameQuest. Do want to give a quick shout out, though, to our friends over at PrizePicks. You can win 25 times your money back on any entry. It's so much fun. All you got to do is you pick the over-under of the total projection from 2 to 6 projections from PrizePicks, and then you can watch the winnings roll in. So I'm going to show you what it kind of looks like. I'm going to share my screen here if you're watching on YouTube. And this is what we're looking like when we go to PrizePicks.com. As you can see here at the top, every single sport you can possibly think. I don't even know what this LOL stands for. No clue. But you've got NFL football, soccer, you got NBA, you got NHL, I mean, you got PGA, MMA, I mean, NFL sprints. Don't even know what that is, but it looks fun because there's a football icon there. You can have so much fun checking out all these different sports and all these different games and bonuses and prizes over at PrizePicks.com. What we're going to do here today, though, again, for our little grid over here on the right, we're going to pick 2 to 6 players, and we're going to go through, and they're going to give us a stat. We're going to go over and under. Now, Grant Ramey loves him some overs. Very rarely do we do unders here on GameQuest, but let's have a little fun.
Yep.
Joe Milton against Missouri. 238.5 passing yards. Will Joe Milton go over or under 238.5 through the air?
Give me the over. I like
You
that.
like the over?
That. I like that line too, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think I would take the over. Again, I think this could shape up to be a shootout.
Brady Cook, 267 yards and a half through the air. The over under. Win or lose, I'm telling you this right now, Brady Cook's going to throw for more than that, in my opinion, because I think it's going to be a struggle bus city for Tennessee secondary. Just my opinion. We'll see if I'm wrong. But 267.5, I would take the over. What would you say for Brady Cook?
Yeah, I would take the over as well.
Yeah, and again, Tennessee can win a football game that way. Tennessee's already proved that it's can win football games that way this year. So those are the passing. Off to a good start. We take the more for Joe Milton and Brady Cook through the air. What about the SEC's leading rusher? And that's Cody Schrader. You mentioned him. What a story. Former Division II football player. Walked on. Now leading the SEC in rushing right now. Cody Schrader, 90 yards and a half. I'm going to go under. I'm going to go less because I think Tennessee just defends the run really well, Matt.
He's finishing the day with 76. I'm taking the under.
You allow him to go for 76 and a touchdown, and you just don't allow Brady Cook to throw for 400 yards. I think Tennessee can win this football game. I do.
Yep.
Jalen Wright, who, in my opinion, if he had the carries, would easily be leading the SEC in rushing. 69.5 yards rushing.
Over.
Yeah, I'm going to go more. I mean, the last 2 weeks, Matt, Jalen Wright has had what is an 82-yard and a 53-yarder on the opening drive. Yep. I'm not going to say that's going to happen again, but, I mean, it could happen again. Obviously, it's kind of been a theme. All right, let's find one receiver through the air here. Okay, we'll go Tennessee. I was going to do Luther Burden because I thought that'd make more sense, but he's not on here. Let's do Squirrel White. Receiving yards, Squirrel White against Missouri, 62.5. You like the over or the under?
That's tough. I like the over there. I think Georgia had a lot of success out of the slot last week. I thought they did a really good job of moving Ladd McConkey around and getting him, running vertically. And I think Tennessee will do some of those things. I think Tennessee's had success in the past, against Missouri with those things. So give me Squirrel White with the over.
That's a good call in terms of McConkey in the slot last week for sure. So this is what our grid looks like. We have 5 players selected. You can select between 2 and 6. Against Tennessee, Missouri, Joe Milton over 238.5. Brady Cook more than 267.5. Cody Schrader less than 90.5 on the ground. Jalen Wright more than 69.5 on the ground. and Squirrel White more than 62.5 through the air. So that is our grid, and you can make yours as well over at PrizePicks.com. Plus, if you put in the promo code VQ, you're going to get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 on your first deposit. Meaning, if I put in 75, they're going to match me 75. I put in 50, they'll match me 50 on my first deposit if I put in that promo code VQ, but only on your first deposit, and it's only up to $100. That's promo code VQ, PrizePicks.com, promo code VQ. Go and win 25 times your money back at PrizePicks.com. Welcome back into GameQuest, Tennessee Volquest Game Day podcast. Tennessee on the road at Missouri, Monster Showdown. And let's take a look at the Missouri. Let's dive into the stat sheet. Matt Ray, this is a Missouri team that pretty solid offense. Fifth in points per game at 32.4. Fifth in total O at 434 yards a game. Fifth through the air at 285 a game. Seventh, though having the individual leading rusher in the SEC, is the seventh best team in the league in rushing at 149 yards on the ground a game. It's only turned it over 7 times. The offensive line has only allowed 16 sacks. Again, top to bottom, this offensive unit has been much improved.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think it comes back to some balance. I think we've seen it from Tennessee the last couple of weeks. I think you've seen a really balanced offense. For Missouri, that's kind of been the story this year. There's been more balance. They've got guys making plays on the edge. Like you said, 7th best rushing team in the league, but they have the league's leading rusher, and he's been a great story, and he has been playing some really hard-nosed football for them. So, I think for Missouri, again, another big thing for them is Brady Cook's legs and not turning the football over. We saw it with Tennessee last year. Hendon Hooker was so good at not turning the football over, not comparing those two because they're definitely not the same player. And obviously Hendon, to this point has had a better season than Brady Cook has had. But I think Brady Cook's been timely when he runs the football, and he's protected the football pretty well.
I wouldn't call him the second coming, such as young Vol fan Never Ban, called me out on the board a couple of days ago. But Brady Cook's having a solid year. He's top 5 quarterback in the league. Much improved. You mentioned his legs, 304 yards a game. That's before sacks. He's got 5 rushing touchdowns. He's completing passes at 67%, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 275 through the air. Again, he's top 5 quarterback in this league, and he's been much improved. He's been really solid, and he's a guy that if you ask me the biggest concern, if I was asked on a radio hit earlier this week, if you're Tim Banks, if you're that defensive staff, what's your biggest concern? It's his legs. It's his ability to pick up first downs on third downs. It's his ability to extend plays and all that, and just run around and make things happen, because that's where Tennessee has struggled a little bit this year. But more importantly, it's just been in my mind since 2021, where it was Matt Corral, it was Bryce Young. It was all these quarterbacks that just ran. Kenny Pickett just ran and ran and ran, and that's like not really gone out of our mind since then. But that'd be something to watch out for. Cody Schrader, we've mentioned a couple of times, 919 rushing yards on the year, 10 touchdowns, averaging 102 yards per game. You got Luther Burden, who Eli Drinkwitz said was questionable earlier in the week. I would be just shocked if he didn't play. He came back in that football game last week, 919 yards.
He never even went to the medical tent.
Yeah, he refused to go to the medical tent.
He was in obvious pain, but he refused to go to the medical tent. He's going to play. Yeah.
He's got 958 yards through the air, 7 touchdowns. He's averaging over 106 yards a game receiving. Not bad there. So, again, this offense, we will see what happens. If I'm Tim Banks, Matt, I'm not being married to anything specific. I'm playing zone. I'm relying on my front four. If it doesn't work, he's brought Wesley. I think Tennessee's been at its best with Tim Banks when he's been aggressive.
Yep.
And we've seen it a little bit this year, but in years past, man, Tamari McDonald off the edge, covering number 2 receiver, coming off the edge. Wesley Walker. Aaron Beasley is the best blitzer on this team, and we haven't seen him blitz a lot this year.
Nope.
If things aren't working, don't be married. Don't be unwilling to move on. I say mix some things up, be aggressive, and keep Brady Cook guessing on the offensive end.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the best games that Tim Banks has called here at Tennessee is when he's been aggressive. And I think some of the stuff that he's done, I think he's been sometimes really exotic in some things that he's done, and it's worked. But Seems like sometimes they get a little bit, and I don't know if I should say complacent, but they're okay with giving up, you know, yards in certain situations and then try to bow their backs more so in the red zone. And I understand some of that to an extent, but I think in a football game like this, you're gonna have to make some of your own breaks. And I think it goes to what you said. You can't be married to anything. Just be aggressive, try to be timely with that aggressiveness. But I think you're right. I think when you get those DBs cheating down in the box and coming off the edge, I think Aaron Beasley has been phenomenal as a blitzer. We saw it in the bowl game last year. We've seen it multiple times. Look back, and they've been really good at dialing up those pressures with their linebackers.
Jeremy Banks has been phenomenal throughout his Tennessee career blitzing.
Yeah, I mean, he was great. And look back to that Alabama game last year where they're pinned down in the south end zone and he comes screaming free right in Bryce Young's face. So I think Tennessee has to be able to do some of that. You got rattle Brady Cook, get in his face. As a quarterback, the worst thing you can feel is uncomfortable in the pocket. No matter what you can do with your legs, there's going to be a point in time in this football game that he should have to step up in the pocket and make a play. And if you can make him feel uncomfortable, then you should be able to have some success.
And you're speaking from experience, right? Being in that pocket, being uncomfortable before, right?
A little bit.
At Bradley Central the other day, when it was before I went up to the booth, and me and you were talking to Heupel there on the sideline. You stayed there and talked to Heupel the entire game because you guys are BFFs. But three of us there, and you mentioned something like, "Man, I ain't done that since I played quarterback" or something. And I wanted so bad Heupel to be like, "You play quarterback?" And I wanted to go back and forth, but he didn't take the bait, and I was a little upset. But you guys could have been talking about, war stories. He played quarterback, big time level. You played quarterback, Copper Basin. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, how it doesn't get any more massive than that. I mean, I own at one point I owned the school record for most passing yards in the season, and also most interceptions thrown in the season. So,
hey, that's just Brett Favre-esque right there. Okay,
take it where you can get it.
Hey, you sling it around, you let it rip. You can respect that. Josh Heupel, asked him earlier this week, how do you defend? How do you go about defending an offense that runs the ball well with Cody Schrader, that throws it all over the place with Brady Cook, and how effective is Luther Burden through the air? How are you going to stop Luther Burden? Here's how he talks about defending Missouri's offense and then defending Luther Burden.
You got to be really good in the run game because everything will play off of that too. They create a lot of big plays with chunk plays, design shots down the football field. He's a really good player, and so when he gets the ball in his hands, he's difficult to bring down. They do a good job of moving him around too. Where you got to track where he's at for some of the ball in hands, and they try to find matchups for him. So we got to do a great job against him, but he's not the only wide receiver. They got a really good core group of wide receivers that are dynamic.
So that is on Missouri's offense. Let's flip the script, Matt Ray, and let's talk about Missouri's defense. That, again, 2021, it's one of the biggest puzzling things I've ever kind of witnessed from afar. I wasn't in the nitty-gritty, I wasn't following that team every single week, but, I mean, you had Steve Wilks as your defensive coordinator. Mind you, Steve Wilks, I believe, San Francisco 49ers right now, he's been all over the place, but he's defensive coordinator right now for the San Francisco 49ers. He is a former head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, a longtime defensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers, had great success. Steve Wilks knows defense. In 2021, he was Missouri's defensive coordinator, and they were so bad. Historically bad. He leaves, he gets fired, whatever. They bring in Blake Baker, and they kind of turned it around a little bit in 2022, much improved, and they're a solid defense now. Not great, but they're solid. And you look at the ranks around the SEC, they're 8th in the league, allowing 24 points per game, 6th in the league, allowing 343 yards of total offense a game. They allow 230 yards through the air, that's 9th in the league. They allow only 114 yards on the ground. That's 5th in the league, which is a pretty solid number. I'll come back to that here in just a second. They have forced 8 turnovers, 7 interceptions. They've sacked the quarterback 27 times, and they have 53 tackles for loss. I want to go back to that run stat. They've allowed 114 yards on average, and that's 5th in the league, okay? Tennessee obviously leads the league with, 97 yards given up on that, whatever it is.
Yep.
Tennessee's first in the SEC, Missouri's 5th. 114 yards, that's what actually Tennessee finished with last year, and that was second best to Georgia in the SEC. That's a good number.
Yep.
But when you look at Missouri on the season, really anybody with a pulse, they've had a little bit of success running the football. So against Kansas State earlier this year, 138 rushing yards. That's not a lot. It's not a lot, but it's not like they got shut out. You mentioned LSU a moment ago. 274 rushing yards is what they allowed to LSU. Jaden Daniels, Heisman candidate, he had like 130 on the ground. So, that's a caveat there. Kentucky, 179 yards allowed on the ground. To Georgia, they actually did a pretty good job, 131 yards allowed on the ground. So I think my point is, against some of the better teams, they've proven they can run the football on Missouri, and Tennessee will need to run the football because everything, as Heupel said a moment ago, everything comes off that run. And I think this can be a Jalen Wright game. The more and more the week's gone on, I think this could be a Jalen Wright game, and ball control and clock control in the second half. And what a way to win the game would be running the football. Maybe not like you did in 2021 with 438 rushing yards, but having a really good run day in Como.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think this can be a Jalen Wright game. Obviously, you should get Jabari Small back this week. Felt like he was just held out precautionary last week, get some rest. But you should have your full stable of running backs back. But it feels like this can be a Jalen Wright game. I also think when you look at this game, Carson Beck did it a couple of times last week. Joe Milton has to be more involved in the run game. Now, obviously, over the past 3 weeks here, Tennessee has gotten him more involved. There's been more design runs, but there's going to be times where he's just got to, realize it's not there, stick a foot in the ground, and go get 5 or 6 and pick up a first down. If he can extend some drives that way and keep Missouri a little off balance, then I think Tennessee can be really, really productive offensively in this football game. And I think you're right, Eric. I think anybody kind of with a pulse has had some success against Missouri. Look back to that Kansas State game. Will Howard was kind of out there hobbling around on one leg at one point. It felt like he wasn't fully healthy. Still a big win for Missouri there. But Jaden Daniels had a ton of success. You don't expect that, from Joe Milton. Jaden Daniels absolutely torched Alabama last week, too, with his legs. But you do have to be timely. I think Joe Milton has to be timely and realize there's just going to be some opportunity there. There's going to be some times where you got to run, slide down, get 5 or 6 yards. If it's 2nd and 10, run, get 5, 6, 7 yards, slide down, make it 3rd and manageable. But yeah, I think overall, the more this week has gone on, it does feel like a Jalen Wright football game.
Some of the players to look out for: Missouri defensively that runs a 4-2-5 multiple. Of course, that's pretty much what everybody runs now with that star player and a Leo type player. Tyron Hopper in the middle. He's been a starter for Missouri for a long time at linebacker. He leads the team in tackles. Cornerback Chris Abrams-Drain. He's an NFL prospect. I think he'll be a top couple round pick in the NFL draft. 4 interceptions, 11 PBUs. Somebody to watch out for. Spoke with Kelsey Pope earlier this week for a Vol Network interview that's going to air right before the game, and he said, hey, this secondary, I mean, you look at the names, and from doing these, obviously from covering Tennessee and from doing these first glances the last couple of years, I mean, these names, they all are familiar. Joseph Charleston, Jalen Carlisle's or whatever, Chris Abrams-Drain, Ennis Rackenshaw Jr., they've all played for a long time in the Missouri secondary, and so they're experienced. They know what they're doing. They know the system, and I would certainly give Missouri secondary check compared to Tennessee secondary. But again, I think Tennessee matches up. I think this is going to be a really good battle. There's a lot of interesting twists and turns, and we'll kind of get into some of our predictions and what we think is going to happen. But real quick, here's Josh Heupel on the Missouri defense and how Tennessee can find some success.
Yep, fast, aggressive, tackle extremely well, play a bunch of man on the outside. They're going to make you earn it. You look at them statistically, defensively, playing the run extremely well, and are one of the top teams in the country in creating sacks. They got really good players up front. They do it with pressure, but their 1st, 2nd, and 3rd levels are tied in together extremely well.
We don't often talk about the 3rd phase of the game, Matt, but I do want to make one note because it could come down and be the difference here. The thicker kicker, whatever his nickname is, Harrison Mevis. All right. Dude made a 61-yard field goal to win at the buzzer over Kansas State in week 3. And remind me, something happened, whether it was a false start, whether it was a delay of game, something happened and they had to back up 5 yards.
Yeah. Felt like complete mismanagement of it. It was complete mismanagement of that game. But you got away with it because of his leg.
I think it was delayed game because I remember thinking like, Eli, you're such an idiot.
Yep.
And then he leaves that game going calling out the fans. It's like, well, it's like the biggest win you've ever had as a head coach in the SEC. I know that's not even an SEC win, but it's like, why are you calling out the fans when your kicker just booted a game winner from 61 yards? All right, Harrison Mevis, he's got a leg. On the season, he's 3 for 5 with kicks 50 plus. In comparison, Charles Campbell has been perfect at 50 yards in so far this season, 0 for 2 at 50 yards plus, which is weird because Charles Campbell has hit like 5 or 6 50-plus yard field goals throughout his career at Indiana. Anyway, but Mevis has booted 3 kicks 50-plus yards in, but he's 1 for 4 on kicks 40 to 49 yards. He's been really inaccurate in terms of that mid-range and field goals. So got a leg. Overall in the season, he's just 15 to 21. So he's missed 6 field goals. He's got a leg, certainly, but a little bit inaccurate at times, and potentially, that could be something that could come down the line. You don't want to, give an opportunity for Missouri to win it there at the buzzer. All right, Tennessee and Missouri. The time for some score predictions and some bold predictions. Me and Grant do it every single week. We hand out a bold prediction on what we think is going to happen in this football game, and then let's follow it with the final score prediction, Tennessee and Missouri. Matt, you're up.
So we're going, how bold are we in these predictions?
Dude, make it your own, man. Sometimes I'll say mine. I'm like, that's not bold enough, and so I'll redo it, and I'll get something super bold. And no pressure, but there have been, I want to say at least 3 or 4 times this year where either mine or Grant's bold prediction has hit or has been like a yard or 2 away. So like we've had some success in our bold predictions this year.
So let's go with Tennessee to score a special teams touchdown and a defensive touchdown.
Okay, that's very bold.
And you said make it my own. I don't know how bold we're going here. I should have done my research on this portion of the podcast.
We can tell that somebody over here doesn't listen to GameQuest every single week on his drive to the Neyland Stadium. Yeah, that's fine. I would do bold take would be one of those units scoring a touchdown. But hey,
it's pretty bold. Yeah.
If Tennessee gets a special teams touchdown and a defensive touchdown,
they win the ball game.
I feel good about Tennessee winning the football game. Give me. It doesn't set up this way. It doesn't set up well for this. Because look what Graham Mertz did. Look what Devin Leary did. I think it's going to be a lot quick, 3-step. Maybe not get the ball out of your hands quickly, but just a quarterback that's going to pick you apart, especially in the intermediate range. But I think Tennessee's defensive line is going to get there and get back to sacking the quarterback. Give me a combined 4 sacks. And maybe this isn't bold enough. Give me a combined 4 sacks from James Pierce and Tyler Barron on Brady Cook. And
that's pretty fair.
That would be really, really good for the Tennessee defense to get back to doing what it needs to do. And if you're sacking the quarterback 4 times, you're probably getting close another 4 or 5 times. You're probably hitting the quarterback. It's probably going to be a long day for Brady Cook, and that's what you need. Overall, Matt, I know our game day, well, as our GameQuest listeners know, they know that we record this before our picks go live on Friday at noon. But you've already made your pick, already put it in there in drafts. I have not. What are you thinking? How's this game going to go for Tennessee on the road at Missouri?
Yeah, I don't remember I don't remember exactly what I picked in terms of the score. I did pick Tennessee to win, and the more that I probably need to change the score realistically where we're at now at the time of this recording. But I do think it can be an offensive football game, a lot of points scored. So give me Tennessee 38-34.
At the time of this recording, Tennessee still is a 1.5-point favorite. The over/under, the total, in other words, is 58.5. Man, all week long, or really like in the weeks leading up to this game, I have not liked this game for Tennessee. I've seen this as a game that Tennessee could potentially lose because Tennessee loses these types of games. The quarterback that can sling it a little bit, just making your defense run all over the place, road game. I've been more and more confident with Tennessee as the week's gone on because, I don't care where you're playing, who you're playing. If you run the football the way Tennessee's been running the football, you're going to have a chance to win the football game.
Yep.
And also, Joe Milton is playing his best football right now. And that wasn't the case against Florida. That wasn't the case going into Alabama. That wasn't the case, in previous stops. And so Joe Milton's playing his best football right now. Tennessee overall, knock on wood, is getting healthy. There's some season-ending injuries, I get that, but Tennessee's a pretty healthy football team. I don't know. I've liked Tennessee more and more and more as the week's gone on. I mean, I picked Tennessee to win every game so far this season. Probably won't next week. Spoilers, is what it is. That's why I always think it's funny when people call some of us out like, "Oh, such Tennessee haters." Like, I've literally picked Tennessee to win every week this season. Give me Tennessee. I think it's going to be so close. I think it's going to be the difference. Maybe it comes down to a field goal. Maybe it comes down to Charles Campbell or Harrison Mevis or whatever. Give me Tennessee to win 35-32. I don't know if that's what my pick will say on Friday, but give me Tennessee win 35-32. And Matt Ray, if that happens, Tennessee will come back to town 8-2, 4-2 in SEC play, hosting Georgia. Maybe an opportunity to go to Atlanta, but probably not. But still, it's going to be a massive game. CBS Kick. We'll see if Gameday's in town. I mean, it's already starting to be. The circus is already kind of starting on campus in preparations for the Georgia game, regardless of what happens this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you win this game, even if Georgia secures the East with a win over Ole Miss, this game is going to be as big as a game has been in the month of November at Neyland Stadium in quite some time. I mean, this game is going to be massive for Tennessee. It has, depending on what happens ahead of them, Ole Miss should drop. So it's got the chances to be a top 10 matchup. And you've still got a ton to play for. You beat Georgia, you are solidified into a New Year's Six bowl and, should go win 10 regular season games. So
I can't remember if I said this to you on one of our podcasts this week or one of my shows, or I said it somewhere. I think regardless, Tennessee's playing for Citrus Bowl right now against Missouri. Citrus Bowl, because you win that game again, you're finishing the year with 9 wins at minimum, maybe 10 wins. And you're probably graduated from the tiers of the, obviously, Gator, but maybe even the Outback. And depending on, what happens in front of you, how many teams the SEC get in the playoff, and then New Year's Six, I get all that. But I think you're playing for Citrus at minimum in this football game. You win, you got Citrus at worst case scenario. You lose, well, Outback, Gator, some of those are still in play. So we'll see what happens, man. It's going to be a good one. This is a huge matchup. Super excited to see how this team responds, how this team goes up there, handles the Zoo. I've been trying to make fun of the Zoo all week long, but your team's 7-2. I can't really make fun of it. But still, I will never forget, Matt Ray, that video they put out in preseason. Just a complete fail. And didn't they do some type of rap video a couple years ago? There's been some big fails up there.
There's been some big fails.
And I know it's not the same thing, but that's one of the best journalism schools in America. I know it's not the same thing, but that's more creative content. Fail. Just, fail. Andy from The Office, fail. I mean, it was so bad. So I've tried to make fun of them this week. It's kind of hard to make fun of a decent football team, but let's not forget that video they put out in preseason. If you haven't seen it, go Google the Zoo Rules or whatever it's called, and get a good laugh here on your way up to Como. Somebody also asked in the chat, the Tuesday night chat earlier this week, is the drive worth to Como from Nashville? I haven't been there yet, and I simply said, no, it's not. It's going to be cold, windy. Have you've been, haven't you?
I've been.
It's not any highlights?
No.
Trying to think.
I mean, no. Not to speak.
Our buddy Mike Wilson at the New Sentinel was served chicken at the local Applebee's, and it was not cooked. It was. I
remember this tweet.
Yes. So that was a thing. So yeah, there's a lot of good things out there in Como. It's going to be a quick trip. Hopefully everybody travels safe, and we'll see what Tennessee can do at Missouri. Follow along, Volquest.com. We'll preview it continually up until kickoff. We'll have a game thread up there on the General's Quarters. If you're a Twitter user, if you're an X user, Volquest_on3. We'll have all the pregame, live game, and post-game coverage, everything you can ask for at Volquest.com. Then we'll come back, get ready for a big recruiting weekend against Georgia, and Matt Ray will have a lot on that as well. Matt, great stuff. Probably the best GameQuest we've had all year long. If we can just get you and Grant to do it together, oh my God, ratings would soar.
Yeah, right.
All right, buddy. Appreciate you, and thanks everybody for tuning in to another edition of the Volquest GameQuest podcast.